Who's being disenfranchised in America? Republicans claim it's conservative voices, but new data from Pennsylvania shows that it's Democrats who are being disenfranchised. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So conservatives who've been espousing the big lie that Donald Trump was the real winner of the 2020 election, as well as those in Arizona who claim that Kari Lake actually won that election, are fast to claim that their ballots are not being counted and that somehow elections are being skewed in a way that it benefits Democrats at the expense of Republicans. But new data from Pennsylvania shows that that is a lie. Just last week, the Pennsylvania Secretary of State, in a review of the ballots that were thrown out in the 2022 midterm election, revealed that of 16,000 ballots thrown out in that election as a result of MAGA Republican court rulings, more than 2/3 of them were Democrats. Well, let's talk about what the reasons are that these ballots were thrown out. Apparently, 8,250 of them were thrown out because they were sent in without being contained in a secrecy envelope. Now, typically the way that mail-in ballots work, for those of you who haven't experienced them in the past, is that the ballot itself will be completed, then it will be put into an envelope that gets sealed. That's a secrecy envelope. That secrecy envelope then gets signed by the voter, and according to Pennsylvania law, also has to be dated by them. Then that envelope is put inside the envelope that gets mailed into the local clerk's office. The reason for this double envelope procedure is because of the fact that that protects the secret ballot. It basically makes it so that you can't identify who was the individual who voted. Let me just clarify something. I might have misspoke earlier. The signature and the date go on the exterior envelope. So the secrecy envelope does not include any name or identifying characteristics of the person who voted. So that means that most of the ballots that were thrown out because of the fact that the ballot was simply put directly in the exterior envelope and not first in the secrecy envelope and then into the exterior envelope. So now let's talk about the rationale that conservatives have for these different restrictions on being able to vote. They claim that the reason that you want these restrictions is to make it that you can reduce fraud, that people won't vote who aren't entitled to vote. But in this case, we can see that the ballots that are being thrown out have nothing to do with that. All the secrecy envelopes do is that they ensure that the person who voted a certain way on the ballot cannot be identified. In other words, the only person who's hurt by not including the secrecy envelope is the person who voted. They can be linked with how they voted. The individual can be identified. Essentially, their ballot is no longer secret. That does not mean, though, that the ballot itself does not accurately reflect the choices of the person who is sending in the ballot. Furthermore, they do not do anything to limit people who are not entitled to vote from submitting ballots, because of the fact that all that information is on the exterior envelope, where the person's identifying information, their signature, and the date are located. So here, this data from Pennsylvania reveals two things to us. Number one, despite conservative claims to the contrary, it's Democratic votes that are being disenfranchised. In fact, really, it's quite remarkable that the Democrats had such a good year in Pennsylvania, even with so many of their votes being thrown out. There had been an effort to try to address this issue by the outgoing Democratic governor and the Republican legislature in the past. But now that Democrats have control of the governorship and the House in Pennsylvania, hopefully we'll be able to make some progress on addressing this problem. I mean, fundamentally, the Democratic position should be we want all votes to be counted. Republicans' position has been we want to stop people from voting. And we need to make it clear that that's the contrast. And this data supports that argument. Secondly, it points out that the entire basis for the Republican claim that they want restrictions on voting, specifically that they are trying to increase election security and stop votes from being counted that aren't entitled to be counted, is a lie. Again, the internal secrecy envelope has nothing to do with whether this person's A, entitled to vote, or B, actually submitted an appropriate ballot. And I'm not even mentioning the other 7,900 or so other ballots that were thrown out, primarily because on the outside envelope, the person either didn't date it or dated it incorrectly. Now, granted, it is a requirement of Pennsylvania law that the envelopes be dated, but if a person actually signs the envelope and forgets to date it or dates it incorrectly, that has nothing to do with whether the ballot is appropriate and the individual is entitled to cast the ballot. This is what we call a de minimis problem, not a material issue. As I described to my students, a material issue is an issue that matters, that would make a difference on the ultimate result. And in this case, if someone dated an envelope incorrectly or forgot to date it, but yet it's signed and everything else is correct with the ballot, how does that have any impact on the legitimacy of the ballot? I mean, it doesn't even have any impact on whether the ballot should be counted as being timely. That is based upon the date stamp that is put on the ballot when it's received by the local clerk's office. So the reality is it's just a superfluous requirement that really has no impact on anything. And it's just one more example of how Republicans are basically using every little rule that they can find to try to deny people the right to vote, and that these efforts, contrary to Republican claims, have nothing to do with ballot security, and instead everything to do with keeping Democratic votes from being counted. Well, if you want to see another video on how it's the Republicans committing voter fraud, not Democrats, check out this video over here. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.